Okay, so welcome everybody. This is the support team kickoff. This is following on to the Q1 2020 update call that we did last week and that you can find on YouTube. And this is following on to the goals there, right, about creating a really excellent user experience, user support experience for Bisq users, and just upping our game in every way. So what I want to do in this call, the goals for this are to do just that, like kick off essentially a new start for the team with everybody on the same page. A bunch of people after the call last week, at least, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 pinged me and said they were interested in joining the team, i.e. like providing, doing user support, being a support agent, as it were. So I want to welcome those people, and I want to lay out a process by which anybody can become a support agent in a structured way, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. The big goal is that we actually begin using the key pieces of infrastructure that I'm going to lay out here immediately, and we'll keep all this under an hour. So there's a caveat, though, that everything you're about to see is a work in progress. And I hope you'll see, I hope you'll agree that there's an overarching plan, a clear set of how this infrastructure interlocks and should help us achieve the sort of quality of service goals that we want and need to provide. But it's rough and ready, right? So we'll work out all the kinks as we go. And indeed, I didn't actually want to be overly polished or overly prepared here, because this is really a function of a team working together. So I wanted to lay the foundation, lay the groundwork, have something that we can all begin using now, and keep the feedback going. And that'll be a test of our communication channels and stuff like that to, smooth out the rough edges as we go, figure out what's really going to work. All right, so the agenda is, I want to introduce the Bisq wiki. I think most people are aware that that exists now and how that's going to serve as our knowledge base. Go through this process of becoming a support agent, and what we're calling interning or internship. How to use the coverage calendar, how to use the support case tracking board. So this is a GitHub-based, GitHub issue approach to tracking support cases. And I think I just heard some echo. I think everybody went back on mute, but if you haven't, please mute. There's a new, not Keybase channel, but a new Keybase sub-team specifically for support, and we'll get into that. And I want to talk about how we communicate going forward. There's obviously Keybase, but I think we need maybe a little bit more structure for announcements and discussions that we really want everybody to see. Okay, and then we'll have any Q&A and discuss in general. So the Bisq wiki, that's live right now. Account creation is open, so everybody on the call is invited to create an account. So the idea here is to really embrace the kind of wiki ethos, right? Which is all about, be bold, make edits, right? And, other people can make your edits better, right? And this was a decision to not try to achieve what we need to achieve with a knowledge base and so on with the existing docs infrastructure. The existing docs infrastructure is pretty good for a number of reasons, serving us relatively well, but it's a heavyweight process for a support agent who's just trying to get something down and documented and linked to it and not have to repeat themselves in the future. To go through the process that we have and the technology that we have with the docs repo is not really ideal. And I think a wiki is or can be. So let's take a look at it. You'll see very new, right? There's nothing on the main page. There's not even any links to existing pages. There are existing pages, and I'm going to show you some of those, and they'll be linked in the slide deck. All of this will flesh out over time, right? But we're the first ones in here, first ones to use this new infrastructure. So looks very familiar, right? It's a media wiki. It's just like Wikipedia. It's just like the Bitcoin wiki, very intentionally, right? So essentially everybody on the planet knows this, sort of knows intuitively how a media wiki looks and feels and works. So hopefully that's inviting, and it really will be open. It'll be open to anybody who wants to come and edit. That's the same way the Bitcoin wiki is, and it's a pretty useful resource today. So we have moderation options. We haven't turned them on. We'll see, we'll just ratchet down control on an as needed basis. But for right now, it's open. So if you're thinking about adding something, and feel free to like discuss it first and say, hey, what do you think about this or whatever. But it's wide open. So create an account and get familiar. And we're going to get familiar as we go through this. So hello to the Bisq wiki. And in terms of it being a knowledge base, right? It's pretty clear to me that this is going to grow well beyond a knowledge base. Indeed, it already has, just in some of the pages that have been created, and I'm going to show you shortly. But the idea is to model the knowledge base as a category, in the sense that you see categories in Wikipedia, right? The media wiki notion of a category. So there will just be pages, right? Like how to resync your SPV file or whatever as a discrete knowledge base support article, right? How to do that, why you would need to do that, what the cases are that need to lead to needing to do that, etc. But it's just an article, and it's a part of the knowledge base category, right? And of course, we can, create lists of links and so on to those knowledge base articles. But there's not like a deep hierarchy here. It's all kind of tag based or category based. And no such pages exist just yet. Bisq Knight is considering, who's on the call right now, has put together a couple of drafts, and I think he's going to post those to the wiki, so we have a little bit of seed content to work with. And I've looked through them, but I haven't suggested any edits at all. It's kind of a good test case, right? I think there will be edits. We'll want to do edits, but hey, let's get them up there and see who goes for it, wanting to edit. I know Steve, right, team lead of the growth team, who's not on the call right now, has already said that he's willing to spend minimal amounts of time, maybe 1 or 2 hours a week, providing a kind of editor role, since he's been responsible for the docs repo, and that's kind of his wheelhouse and forte. He's a writer and an editor and so on by practice. So he'll provide some oversight, some editing, help set the standards a little bit, help provide guidance. I'll certainly be doing that too, since I'm just very much in the wiki right now and helping figure out how it ought to be structured and things like that. But in the meantime, if you have some useful piece of information that you think is a good fit for a knowledge base article, certainly consider adding it, right? Maybe discuss amongst the team, but essentially go for it. Okay, so if you're thinking back on this talk and you're thinking about all the things that we discussed and say, well, where do I start? Where was all that stuff at, right? Well, you can start right here. So there's a support team page in the wiki. Again, remember, everything's a work in progress. This is all done very quickly over the last few days. But you get the idea here just at a glance of what we're trying to do, right? So like we talked about last week, there's 5 teams: admin, support, growth, dev, ops, right? So the support team is one of those teams under the Bisq DAO. And this page would be, just a high level overview of what the support team is, what it does. Notice that link, right? The link to support. Click on that in a moment, but it enumerates the different roles that are that comprise the support team. The infrastructure that the support team is using or responsible for, and where we chat and so on. So you can imagine that this will probably build out a little bit more, but that's the idea. It should be a kind of homepage, right, for the support team. So let's click on support, and this would be, we would want to land users on this page, right? So whether that's links from the front page or whatever sort of navigation we come up with, we'd want this to be prominent for users to see, right? And right now, this is just listing out, the different options. There are a number of ways that users can get support, right? Some of it's self-service via docs or what will become the knowledge base here. And, obviously there's Keybase, and called out that it's the primary user support channel. Ask questions here first if you're in doubt. And everything else is placeholder at the moment, but, it'll be just light description and links, right? Kind of a, routing page so that people can choose where they want to go. Okay, so let's go back. And now let's talk about this process of how to become a support agent. So right now, there's really just a small number of people who are already sort of officially support agents, or kind of being grandfathered in to the new support team by virtue of the fact that they've been doing the work. They've indicated to me that they want to continue doing the work. They've declared, what times they can work for the coverage calendar, which we'll get to in a moment, and so on and so forth. So they meet all the requirements and are already doing the work. So they're in, and then everybody else is, has expressed interest or has maybe done a little bit of work, but not in a consistent way, and so on. So this process of internship applies to everybody else. So let's take a look at that. First of all, this page, right, the support agent page, is linked to from the support team page. You might have seen that in the roles section, right? So one role under the support team is support agents, and they have a dedicated page. That's part of a category 2, right? So roles under the Bisq DAO. This can essentially become our new roles documentation repository, which we started but never really finished under the first iterations of the DAO. So, there's just a couple of such articles here, support agent and the support team lead, that I've just begun to flesh out here. But that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a role page. And you can see table of contents, right? This might be familiar, right? If you are already, the owner of a role, or you've looked through this documentation, you know that roles always have duties, what's expected of the owner of that role, rights, what sort of privileges, what sort of access do they have, and then what sort of processes is that role responsible for or involved in. We've also added the notion of policies here, which we'll get to. But to begin with, right, since we're talking about internship, and I want to touch this first for the people who are just coming to the call to see if they're interested, right? Just get right to the point. How do you join the team if you're interested? Well, so I want to introduce this idea of an internship process that would last one DAO cycle. So that's roughly 1 month in block time, right? And during that period, you do essentially everything a support agent does, but your contributions aren't eligible for compensation. So it's essentially a trial period. Gives you a chance to catch up, get up to speed, learn, know the ropes, etc. Other support agents, other members of the support team would be helping you do that. And then, all parties involved just get to figure out, is this a good fit? Is this a good idea going forward? And if everybody decides, yeah, it is great. Well, first of all, I'm getting ahead of myself. So to engage in this, you would simply say in the support channel that you're interested in being a support agent. Maybe introduce yourself, say when you can work with an eye toward getting yourself on the calendar, which we'll look at in a moment. And the support team lead will service that request, right? They'll add you to the interns team and add your requested shifts to the support coverage calendar. So you won't have all the rights. You won't have, say, sort of right access to the support repository and other things, but you'll be able to function as a support agent, to do the work of a support agent. And after one full cycle, if you so choose, you would then submit a proposal, just like any other DAO proposal, an issue in the proposals repository, if you're not familiar, to be added to the official support agents team, right? And if that's approved, then the team lead would do everything that's necessary to get you into that, right? So hopefully that's a simple process, but I hope everybody can understand, it just doesn't make sense to have someone come along who's maybe brand new to Bisq, a name we've never heard before, and they say, I want to be a support agent. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to give them access to private, secure chats and access to everything and so on. And, say essentially, welcome to the team, sort of like hiring without an interview, right? So this is the intention of this process, this internship process, is to have the lightest weight yet effective way for both sides, both parties, to evaluate, is this the right thing for me? Is this the right thing for the team? And yeah, so that's the idea. Might be further questions about that, of course. We can talk about it at the end, ping me afterward, whatever. But that's the basic idea. And now the coverage calendar. So a number of people on the call have already, sort of put their time in the calendar. So I'll just show it to you for a start. So you'll find all these links on the support team or the support agent page, right? As part of the infrastructure there. Links to this kind of HTML version, links to an iCal file that you can import into any calendar software, a link to the actual kind of official Google Calendar, right? It's not this sort of read-only view, but like actually requires you being logged into your Google account. And you can add this calendar to your set of Google calendars and so on. So you manage it just like any other calendar you have. And so you can see a couple of things here. Actually, I'm going to show my own. I'm going to show my own calendar here. Yeah, it's a little bit better view. This is how you would see it in your own calendar software anyway, right? So where we see slots, oh, actually, I'll change that in a moment. But so where you see slots like ranges of time, these are level 1 supports, shifts, if you will, right? So in this case, Leo has said, okay, I know I commit essentially to being available from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. I think we've got it actually 7 days a week, right? Not required to do anything 7 days a week, but that happens to be the case for Leo. Great. Meaning, right, during that, this happens to be a 2-hour block, right? During that 2-hour block, I'm committing to sort of really be on call, on duty, right? Somebody asks a question, it's my responsibility. There might be somebody else on duty at that time, great, and you're in a race condition to see who answers first, that's all fine. But if it's your shift, it's your job, right? And someone else may answer, that's fine, but you're on point, right? Now, these shifts don't mean that that's like the exclusive time that you can do work or something like that. Like, when Leo was setting this up, he said, look, I'm checking my phone throughout the day. I might answer something via mobile. This is a time that I can be dedicated in front of my machine and really buckle down and do it. But I might be working throughout much of the rest of the day. And of course, that's totally welcome, right? We don't want to like just narrow it down to you can only work during a shift or something crazy like that. But the idea is ultimately to get 24/7 coverage, that there's somebody on duty at all times, meaning that users just get taken great care of right away every time. So we're probably a long way from that at the moment, but I think we can get there relatively quickly just with this infrastructure and knowing what we're missing and putting out the request to people who are interested. Okay, great. Well, here's available shifts. Like, can you do any of these, etc. And then when you see these all-day events, these represent so-called level 2 support, which we've talked about on the call last week, which is essentially dev, right? Just a handful, a few developers that we have that have enough breadth and depth in the code base to likely be able to handle escalations from level 1 that are more technical in nature, just require a dev to think about it or analyze logs or, of course, implement a fix if necessary. And the reason that they're modeled as all-day events is one that distinguishes it from level 1. But 2 is that there's just, again, so few resources that can do L2 support that we just name the day, right? Okay, so Christoph is on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, SQ is on Mondays and Thursdays, meaning that, you know, of course they work for however many hours they normally work, 6 or 8 or 10 hours or whatever it is. So they're not on call in the sense that they must, you know, respond quickly to an escalation at midnight their time, but rather they're the person on call for that day, on duty for that day. So the response time, the kind of service level agreement in L2 is longer, right? Like you're not going to, you can't expect to get an answer right away around the clock from the person who's on shift that day, on duty that day. If it's during their working hours, of course, there's a priority to respond as quickly as possible. But if they've say left, you know, their workday is done, they're relaxing, they're sleeping, whatever, they come back the next morning and they see that there were things escalated to them or questions asked of them yesterday while they were away after they were done working or what have you, those would still be their responsibility to follow up on. So basically any escalation that happens on a day that you're on duty as an L2 support agent, yeah, you're responsible for following up with those. Okay. And of course, it may not be that just because SQ is on duty on Thursdays, it may not be the case that SQ actually services the request. It may be that this is something clearly that Christoph has expertise with. Handoff can occur. The point is, the whole point of this is that it's crystal clear to L1 support agents, who should I ping? Who should I @mention right now to see about escalating this? Just so there's no ambiguity. And you can actually have a reasonable expectation. Okay, that person will get back to me as soon as possible or no later than, you know, tomorrow morning their time. Okay, so that's the coverage calendar. And what I would ask, like one of the, you know, action items from this call is, if you're already somebody who is in the support, it is a support agent essentially, and you're not on the calendar yet, let's change that, right? Let's get your information in there and you can ping me directly. Of course, the wiki will have information about how to do this. It's not all there yet, but in the meantime, there's really just a few of us at the moment. So you can just ping me, or rather, and this is a sidebar here, but something that I definitely wanted to mention along the way, or you can ping Leo about it. I've been talking with Leo over the last days, week or so. And as I mentioned last week, the support team lead role is kind of TBD, right? There isn't somebody like in all the other teams, ops and growth and so on. There's a team lead already there, whether it's Wiz or Steve or myself and admin or Christoph and dev. But we didn't name a team lead in support for a couple of reasons. One, it wasn't like super obvious who should do it, who could do it, who would want to do it. Although it's very clear that it should be somebody already in the team, already having done the work, etc. So it was a fairly small field, but also because it's a more involved or more undefined sort of team lead role. We just need to figure out, what does this actually mean? And so at the moment, it's a shared function that mostly I've been taking the lead on, and just laying out, well, everything you see in this call that we're talking about right now. So sort of laying out an initial foundation, and the plan is to hand off incrementally things to Leo, who's expressed he'd really like to play that role. And one of the first things that I've asked him to take charge of is the coverage calendar. So he has, you know, not just edit access, but he can give other people edit access. So he would be the contact point for, you know, hey, I need to get my info in there. Can you give me edit access? Basically, every support agent should have direct edit access. That's one of the rights that you have, right, as a team member, so that you don't have to go through a middleman. But if you're an intern, right, if you're just in that first cycle of, you know, trying this out, you wouldn't have edit access to that. So you would just tell Leah, right, hey, here's the times that I can work. Okay, so now case tracking board. So this one will be new to just about everybody, I think, on the call and listening in. We haven't talked about this at all so far. So let's go there. So again, back to the support agent role page, and part of the infrastructure is what we're calling a case tracking board. And that's in GitHub speak, that's a GitHub project board. So let's go there. And right, so it's in the support repository, which has been around for a long time. And we've managed various kinds of issues in there. If you look right now, there's a number of, the thing we did the most of is these reimbursement issues. And this was kind of not the refund agent process that we have today under the updated trade protocol, but this was a kind of old style reimbursement where if somebody had a failed trade, you know, we made them whole on their fees and so on. So there's a number of outstanding things here. Tomas has been taking care of this. Centineo in Keybase has been responsible for this stuff, and he has a plan with it, and we'll probably see most of these get cleared out fairly soon. But the idea with the project board, and again, some of the project tabs and case tracking, the idea here is to have the lightest weight process and infrastructure that we can to actually track cases. And we talked about having a tracking system, like things that you would expect if you were dealing with like a normal company. Very often it's like what is it called? I can't remember the name of the software, but we've all used it, right? Where you send an email to help@whatever.com, and it comes back with your case number, and you interact with your agent, and then they follow up and it gets closed and so on, and everything like happens by email. That's all very nice, but it doesn't seem suitable for us, right? We don't want to have third-party software involved. We don't want to have a database of potentially sensitive user information. We don't want to ask people for their email addresses, all of that stuff. So Keybase is really great. I mean, I think Keybase is really working in so many ways for us, for the DAO. Seems to be working pretty well for support too, in terms of that people have been happy to come there. I mean, we have 600, 700 some odd members of the Keybase team. Like, people aren't shy about showing up there. So it seems to be a great primary location to have users ask questions, like give their initial question or request or whatever it is. Hey, I have a problem. To get an initial response from us. Okay, somebody's on the case. Hello, okay, let me work with you on this. We've been taking it to direct message very often, right? Just one-on-one Keybase messages. I think we'll continue to do that because it's just the thing that makes the most sense. It's the most secure. It's end-to-end encrypted just between you as a support agent and the user who needs help. That's a good place to share sensitive information, trade IDs, logs, etc. And then, any escalations of that information to whoever's on, L2, that can also happen in a secure way via Keybase, not just via DMs, but also via the new invite-only support sub-team that I mentioned earlier and that we'll talk about in a moment. So Keybase doesn't go anywhere. And that's the kind of, just mechanism for communicating with users and communicating amongst ourselves as a support team. Hey, has anybody else seen this? Hey, could you take a look at these logs? What have you? So nothing changes there. But in terms of actually tracking, we talked about metrics and measuring how we're doing, and having a sense of, especially as the team grows, like, are things getting taken care of? Like, are things slipping through the cracks? How long is it taking to resolve issues? What issues keep on coming up, right? Whether it's because of, outstanding critical bugs or what have you. How long is it taking to respond and close and so on, issues. That's the idea with this support board. So the idea is that if you handle a case, you would come along and create an issue here. And that can all be done by the board. It can be done by the normal GitHub issues interface as well, but it can all be done here. Like, actually, I'm not logged in this browser, so let me jump to my other browser. So when you get to the screen here, right, you can add a card. And actually, let me see. I might be wrong about that. Yeah. Funny. I'm probably missing it, but I think you can actually add the issue here. In any case, let's add the issue here. So as we continue fleshing this out, we'll have a template for support cases. I think it'll make sense to have a template anyway. Right now, there's only a reimbursement case template, but the idea is to just as quickly as possible create a new issue and drop in there just the basics, right? Like, when was this issue sort of initiated, right? Like, when did the user ask about it? Just so we have a start time on it. The time that you're creating the issue is essentially your response time. Like, or if you're doing it after the fact, you could enter how long, what was the time in between the time the person asked a question, they got a response from you, ostensibly. And what's the nature of the issue? So no personally identifying information, no sensitive information, no trade IDs, no user IDs, none of that, but just what is this issue? And what we need is some kind of, so let me open a blank issue. I haven't quite made a decision here about this, and it's one of the things I just want to put out here for everybody. So we need some kind of case ID, right? And again, it shouldn't be the username. Ideally, it shouldn't be the trade ID. Not all user requests have it or associated with a trade or an offer ID. It should just be something unique that can be tracked for yourself, right? That you can correlate however you want to, right? The actual sensitive information you have. You can have a kind of mapping, right? Okay, this thing is related to case ID, whatever. A very geeky way to do this, and I don't know if it's suitable for everybody, but it would be like, just come up with a random ID, right? Like, take today's date, type it to a SHA-1 checksum, right? And then just the first 6 digits off. Something like that, right? But we just need something that is just dead simple that you can click a button on and get a random ID or whatever. I'm totally open to suggestions here. It's a little bit like janky to have to do this. Maybe there's some way simpler way. Maybe I'm like way too hard, right? Suggestions welcome. We just need some way to track uniquely. These are the cases, right? And then you would transition it through the board, right? It's in progress the moment that you started. It gets closed, right? You would close it as, was resolved or was dropped or whatever. And we can have waiting on L2, or, we can figure out what all the labels are here. And one of the most critical things is associating these issues, associating these cases with, known bugs, right? That we kind of, easily, use issue references in GitHub and so on to say, this is one of those, right? And then when we're doing, reporting for compensation purposes and just like normal cycle, that every role does a regular cycle update, cycle reporting, right, on their role issue, that then you have the data, right? You can just issue a GitHub query that says, hey, show me all the cases that, I created or that I closed or that I was assigned to, that I was involved with, etc. And, you've got a record of everything that you did. And then we can go mine that information for our metrics, like, okay, what were our response times like, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, when we do sort of escalation kind of process, like, say I'm a support agent and I need to escalate and it goes to Christoph, well, Christoph can be added as an assignee, right? GitHub issues can have multiple assignees. So you would be the support agent, you're assigned, you're principally responsible for communication with the user, etc. But now Christoph is assigned as L2, and he's on the hook too, right, to help get that thing resolved. So, and now if you picture this from a management perspective, and myself or Leo, whoever's playing the support team lead role, can come and look at this and give some oversight, some overview, like, hey, we end up having these like stale issues hanging around. What's going on with that? Maybe there's some systemic problem going on, or whatever. So having this kind of God eye view of what's going on in support will help us get to these kind of metrics and help drive and manage the stuff. But especially as the team grows, right? If we get anywhere near 24/7 coverage and we have, 5, 10, who knows how many support agents, we got to have something, right? Like this. So that's the idea. I definitely want to get feedback. Let's talk about that toward the end. But the idea is that we would start that just straight away, right? And see how it goes. Everybody will have access to this. It's on the call that is a support team member or a support agent member. I haven't done that yet, but I'll do that ASAP. Okay, so that's the case tracking board. The Bisq.support keybase subteam. So this might be new for some on the call or for some listening in the future, but what's being talked about here is, so Bisq.support, right? So here are the people that are already invited to this sub-team, right? So again, it's not a channel within the Bisq keybase team, but it's a sub-team under the Bisq, the top-level Bisq team. The people that are already here are the people who, again, are already most definitely in the team because they're doing the work. And in many cases, in some cases, these are already bonded roles, right? So the refund agent, mediator, Leo, Wiz, and then, people playing the L2 role, myself playing the team lead role, Bisq Knight playing an agent role. And I'll just to show you what the chat looks like, I looked in here, there's nothing sensitive. So 1 second. Yeah. So this is it ends up looking just like another chat, right? It's not a big team in Keybase speak. So when you go into the Bisq.support sub-team, there's not like a bunch of channels there. There's just one channel. It's basically just a general channel. But the idea is that, so first of all, everything that happens in here is destroyed after 30 days. So they're exploding messages that only last for 30 days. So in terms of like data retention and handling, sensitive user information well, we're sort of doing the right thing by default. We just keep it around for 30 days. And it also means that we don't lean too much on this channel for a tracking mechanism. It's going to be a bad tracking mechanism because it blows up after 30 days. So this is just a place to collaborate. Hey, has anybody else seen this issue? Does this look familiar? Hey, Christoph, you're on L2 today. Can you look at this, right? It's just a coordination space. And it's private for the obvious reasons. We need to be able to speak frankly and without censoring ourselves regarding sensitive user information, right? So the only people that get in here, and you can now see kind of the idea behind the internship and so on. The only people that are here are the people that we know and trust, right? That have been doing the work, doing it well, that are already bonded in the case of bonded roles and so on. So this is a safe place for that kind of information. Yeah. Okay. And I just want to open this up before we open things up to discussing and Q&A this whole talk so far. I want to talk about how we do discussions and sort of team announcements and so on. This is a larger question for the whole DAO, but I wanted to see about getting it started here. And been kind of pushing on using the mailing list that we have, right? Like the Bisq contrib mailing list. Sent a few messages there lately, but it doesn't feel quite right. I mean, I like it for a lot of reasons. I like the sort of serious nature of a mailing list like that, kind of like the Bitcoin Dev mailing list or the Linux kernel mailing list or the Bisq contrib mailing list. There's something nice about the kind of ethos that comes along with that, but it's a totally separate system. It requires potentially every contributor to go, every active contributor to go sign up for that. And, it's just more management. It ends up being a database of emails that we have, which we don't want. And in the end, I think it's just going to be very hard to get like real coverage. And I was talking about on the last call, I think, like if this were a company, we would have, an email server and list, and there would be lists, and there would be like list all, right? And there is no list all for the Bisq DAO. And I think it would be good if there were, because like I mentioned on last week's call, like Keybase is a bad place to like really count on people seeing stuff. You can do channel mentions and so on, but like, look, people might be away, they might be taking a break and they don't look at those things. They shouldn't have to look at those things. Keybase and chat systems like that should be essentially ephemeral. If you see it, you see it, great. If not, no big deal, because you can count on there's some other mechanism that you definitely are going to see, right? And email ends up being very good for that. And I think GitHub discussions have gone back and forth about this since they launched this feature a few years ago, but I'm kind of swinging back toward using it, having taken another look at it. So I don't know if people are familiar, but let's just go take a look, right? So the list all case would be the most top level, team in the Bisq network. Like, oops, again, not logged in there. And teams, right? And so the top level DAO team contains all active contributors in the Bisq DAO. There's actually almost no one in the DAO team itself, but as a function of being one of the sub teams, right, or the sub teams that are underneath them, everybody is a member of the DAO, one way or the other. So if we go to the DAO team page, start a discussion with the Bisq network DAO, right? Big announcements, right? Will be at Bitcoin 2020 or something like that, right? Don't miss the next update call or whatever it is, like something you really want everybody to see, right? This would be a place to do that. It's already all hooked up to people's GitHub notifications. So if you get emails via GitHub, most people do, you would get an email that has this, right? That's like a reliable mechanism that people would actually see it. And then likewise, if we dig down into support, you could send a message to all of Bisq network support, which include the arbitrators, the mediators, the support agents, et cetera, and could drill down from there. So, hey, I want to have a discussion, want to make a decision, want to, really engage the support agents in how's it going with case tracking board, whatever, right? Like, let's have a discussion. It doesn't have to be real time, doesn't have to be in Keybase, it doesn't have to be something that people might miss. Let's have a more sort of, threaded discussion, right? Like an email list, but that we don't have to manage that way. So I really hated this for the longest time, and I never suggested us using it because there was no way to make these discussions public, like public, like, radical transparency. Like, people should be able to see what's going on inside the DAO. And they never implemented this feature of like actually making it public so that anybody can see. What they do have is that it's visible to all organization members. And I sort of forgot that, or it changed a little bit or whatever. And I think that's enough, actually. So that as long as you're a member of the organization, not even a member of the DAO team, you're just in the organization, then you can browse and you can see everything, and you can click watch, right? You can watch a team, which means that you get all of their discussions in notifications via GitHub like you get everything else, and so on. Plus the fact that we actually can make it really and truly public through the, a lot of people don't know this, but we set this up a long time ago. There's the Bisq GitHub archives, where we have a kind of bot user in GitHub that subscribes to everything, watches everything. And so essentially every action that happens in GitHub, not commits, but every issue, every pull request, all of it, right? Every comment gets sort of written behind to this mailing list. So if the worst happened, we got deplatformed from GitHub or just everything blew up, we actually would have a record of everything we ever did there. It would be hard to take much action on it, but the data would be there, right? The conversations would be there. So we can do exactly the same thing with these discussions. So they are actually public for anybody who wants to subscribe to this and maybe filter down, based on certain teams discussions or what have you. So without going into any more detail on that, so I want to discuss discussions. That's, we can just open it up. Would the people on this call, just for a start, would you like to have this kind of a channel for something where, again, it's communications that, you really want others to see and you don't want to count on Keybase for? Yeah, I think that's everything that I had in the deck. Let me just double check. Yeah. So let's just go back to the agenda, just so people can kind of keep in their heads everything that we talked about. And we have 12 minutes or so. So yeah, let's open it up. Any questions, please? And just unmute yourself if you want to say something. So I'm looking at the group chat, just see if there's anything in there to talk about. What's wrong with GitHub issue numbers? In terms of like the ID, the case ID that I was talking about, nothing. There's nothing wrong with GitHub issue numbers, and that would be enough. But I don't think GitHub will let you create an issue without a title. So there has to be literally something in that title, and it could be support case, right? Just the word support case, and then it's support case number 42, right? Okay, maybe that's okay, but it's a little like, it might be a little hard to correlate that in your head as an agent when you're just looking at an ocean of things that say support case, right? I don't know, but it's a good point. I think it's a great use for it, meaning discussions for being less ephemeral. Like, we just published these articles and need help with these. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's some feedback.
So Chris, I think you might have went over this, but I missed it. If we were to use GitHub discussions, would they be archived by that bot that we currently have?
Yes, I actually did the footwork here to just like test it and make sure. And so yes, and the kind of bummer about it is that the bot has to be a member of every team that we want to track. I was really hoping that, like, if it was a top level member of the DAO, that it would just catch everything. But that's not the way it works. And that's good that it's not the way it works, because, well, then everybody who's a member of the DAO, which is everybody, would get every message. So it can't work that way. But it just means that you would see that the bot is called Bisq, right? And so you would see Bisq in basically every team, or at a minimum, somebody needs to log in as Bisq and go click watch on all the teams, right? And new ones that get created or whatever. So it's just something that somebody needs to manage, but it's mostly a one-time setup thing, and then just maintaining it over time. So we probably don't have perfect tracking of everything that we do in GitHub today, because there's probably new repositories that have come along that Bisq isn't watching, for example. So that's an example of how this can kind of atrophy over time, or rot or whatever over time. But that's the cost, is that somebody has to keep in mind, make sure that Bisq is watching, right? But yes, we can do it. So I'll just put one out there. I mean, does anybody see any barrier to that's doing support, right? To actually starting to do these things like immediately, right away? Is there anything in the way, any questions or concerns or what have you? There's a couple of things I need to do, like getting people rights to that repository and so on, but I'll do that immediately. I'm taking silence as a tacit agreement to start doing all this now. Not sure I'm quite following what's going on in chat.
Oh, I totally agree. I think there's no barrier right now. I think there's a clear lack of communication. I think that was a real problem, and this would be a great start towards that goal.
Okay, I mean, on the discussions front, so I would say that the most sort of question marky thing is the discussions, which is we've never used them before. It's a trial. The worst case is we just go, oh, there's something fatally wrong with this, and we stop using it. But probably going to be just fine, right? The one thing that I didn't say about that should be said is it's just one more thing that we're depending on GitHub for, right? And I mean, the whole Bisq thing to the mailing list is a mitigation for that. But like, I looked, I did, 10 minutes worth of research on whether, for example, like GitLab can import GitHub discussions. And I never really found it. Like I didn't find the answer to that. So, it's, in the end, I think the utility that we get from it is worth one more dependency on GitHub, and in one more way being kind of, what's the word? Not beholden to them, but like, just kind of like depending on them, right? But so far we've seen no deplatform, well, almost no deplatformings on GitHub. So I'm not too worried about it, but it's worth just kind of mentioning it. Yeah. So that's one question mark thing. It sounds like everybody's fine with just giving it a try. So why not? So I'll send something out after this call to whatever level of appropriateness in Teams to kind of let everybody know the links to this slide deck, etc. Instead of doing that via Bisq. In fact, I'll say something on Bisq that we're now going to try using GitHub discussions, at least in support. So that's the one big question mark that I have. And the other one is the case tracking board. Like my concern here is like, I don't want this to be a pain in the ass. I don't want this to just feel like heavyweight and like, every time somebody asks a question in Keybase, you go like, oh no, I have to do paperwork on this or whatever. But at the same time, I don't know how we could do anything less that would actually allow us to start getting some measurements, right? So I know lots of tricks, like, there's a GitHub issues command line client, you can get really clever with like how to automate stuff and be like very fast at answering this and have, just local templates. And I mean, like we can get super efficient at it, I'm sure, but I want to be like, I just want to acknowledge that I'm suggesting doing something here that I won't, in fact, myself be doing every day. So, like, I'm very sensitive to people saying, like, no, it's too much or whatever. My hope is that let's all give it a try and actually figure out whether it's too much or, take the next steps to make it more efficient or what have you. But I think I just can't think of anything else to do, right? That's simpler that would achieve those goals. So. I'm just reading the last comments here. From Bisq Knight, there's one more thing we discussed about deleting everything related to a case after it was solved. We don't need that from the start, but we shouldn't lose track of it. Yeah, so the cases themselves, like the case tracking issues, I mean, they would stick around, and it's fine if they stick around because it's all, non-personally identifying information, non-sensitive information. But, and I didn't really mention this, I'm glad you brought it up. The idea, the policy, as I wrote it in the wiki, around sensitive user information is just essentially like, there's no way to manage this in a top-down way. It's just like, there's the stuff in Keybase, right, which is end-to-end encrypted. We might want to start doing something like, exploding messages in DMs and so on. I'm not sure if you can just sort of turn that on with users, just so that they rest assured that that information is going to be blown up. But when it's whatever you do locally, right? Like, if somebody emailed you their logs, or you get the logs outside of Keybase or whatever, you keep them in a folder or something like that. Like, however you're managing, whatever your system is basically fine, as long as it's not some unencrypted cloud service. But, if you just have like a local folder, you just have some process that you just go, I blow those things away once a month, right? Just a calendar reminder to do it. Just so we can all kind of like, with a straight face, say we have not a process, but a policy that we don't keep user data around. The one exception to this would be stuff in mediation, right? Because the mediator's client sticks around as long as it sticks around, and they have that data locally. But okay, it's within the app, it's contained, controlled. You have to have a password to get into it. It's a reasonable situation. It's not just like, hey, I'm just writing this stuff to Evernote or whatever, right?
Do we have some idea of how we want to handle support across channels, like off of Keybase, maybe in terms of assigning support agents to follow Reddit or the forum or other places?
Yeah, I didn't raise that here just because it seemed like one level of depth too much, but I'm very glad that you asked. So we had this notion of Bisq ambassadors that never really fully took off. But the kind of idea around that was like, hey, there are people who essentially represent Bisq in one way or another in these, satellite channels or brand touch points, if you like, like Reddit or Twitter or whatever. I mean, Twitter's a different case because we really manage that, but like Reddit is a good example. There are people who spend time there. And so what I think it can be is that so I think we do away with the notion of ambassadors, and it's just another support agent role. So I think in general, support agents should be manning the support channel, right? Like the definition of it so far is, yeah, you handle support cases like any other support agent, but the people that are out there in Reddit land, like that just have a commitment to being there, are always there, whatever, that they add that to their own, compensation requests, etc. Like, I manned Reddit, and a lot of the case, I was talking to, oh gosh, I'm forgetting which person I talked to about this. So sorry, you're probably listening right now, but I was talking to somebody who does that with Reddit, and the insight there is it's not like support, right? It's not like you should answer every question. That's like, hi, I'm from Bisq, and this is the answer to your problem, right? It's more like paying attention, making sure that people who do need something get their needs met, right? Get their questions answered. If it's being answered by the community, great. We shouldn't have to intervene. But if like somebody's hanging out to dry, like, or they have a huge complaint or something like that, yeah, of course we can step in, right? We can direct them to support if that's appropriate, direct them to some doc or a FAQ or whatever, or just, like answer the question. So I think that's really valuable, especially in I think Reddit is a very good example. Telegram, yeah, maybe not. People that I talked to about that said they don't think it's like all that valuable. But case by case, I think these whatever you want to call them, like satellite channels and so on, I think they should be first class. And it's just a question of which support agents are already doing that and want to keep doing that and can provide that service. And it's just extra value add, right? So, there's some additional compensation available for that, right? Does that answer your question? Does that seem like a sensible approach?
Yeah. Well, I was asking in particular because for growth, I'm going to want to designate some people to follow some of these other channels. And in talking to, I think it was Eminem, I spoke to about it. One of the points he raised was that there may be some overlap with support when you're following these channels. I mean, not everything is going to be a support request, but it will come up. And so how do we reconcile the work someone is doing as growth ambassador, whatever you want to call it, and as support agent?
Well, yeah, I mean, that actually is a bit different than what I said, and happily, it's all very welcome. I mean, if it is kind of it might make more sense as a growth function, right? I mean, because yeah, you're monitoring. This is a very marketing word, right? But you're monitoring these brand touch points, and it's very important to do that, and that is kind of a growth function, right, or a marketing function. So I'm happy if it's like orged under there. And yeah, it's just a logistical question of like, how is that reported and what have you. But I mean, so in that case, like what I said about like, hey, everybody's just an agent and some go manage these other channels or monitor these other channels. Yeah, maybe that's not the case. And maybe the handoff or the trade-off is like, yeah, okay, it's a support issue. You encourage the user to actually go to key-based support, especially if there's something sensitive, right? And then it's just another case, right? That some support agent will be responsible for. If the whatever we call this growth function that you're talking about actually ends up sort of doing some support, well, I think that's not really necessary to distinguish from their normal everyday activities, right? Like if they actually answer a question in any kind of support capacity on Reddit, well, how is that any different than just like answering a basic question or engaging in a conversation or just monitoring stuff? Like they spend a certain amount of time and effort on that, and they charge a certain amount based on that in their compensation requests. So
Yeah,
I guess you could just manage it that way.
sounds reasonable.
Okay, so we're about 5 minutes over now, but I'm happy if people want to talk about anything else to hang out for a couple minutes. I haven't caught up here on the questions. Just trying to read it real quick. I think it was you, Eminem, I was talking about. Yeah, so regarding Keybase's super simple encryption mini app, that's a very good point, right? Like the new crypto tab that showed up in Keybase does make that very convenient. The if you're talking about case IDs, right? So I think the thing is that what we would be encrypting against there would be our own Keybase keys. So it's like it wouldn't be decryptable by anybody else on the team, but maybe that's fine, right? And maybe that's just that much more convenience because literally everybody's in Keybase. And if you just grab the username or grab the date or grab the trade ID if you have it and you just encrypt it, well, you could get back. And that's what's cool, right? That's I was suggesting hashing before just to get to some random value. But of course you can't undo a hash, right? But you could decrypt your own encrypted title if you're like, what was this thing? And yeah, you get back a trade ID or you get back a username. That would be nice. I thought about that, like, okay, PGP or whatever, but it was just like, nope, it's gonna be way too complicated. But with Keybase, it could be perfect. I would say just try it out, right? Like with your next case, Bisq night, just try that. Like you're entering something into GitHub, just do it, right? And for everybody else, like we can have a little experimentation period or whatever. I mean, maybe this is the thing. We should just do encrypt case IDs this way. But I'm happy if people just try something, right? Just come up with a random string in your password app, password generator, whatever, it doesn't matter. But we'll loop back on it and see what makes sense. Yep. Centineo was saying perhaps doing some convenient bots who could do stuff by commands, like you write it to open an issue and assign to me. Yeah, like in terms of just making this really efficient, like opening an issue, starting to track it on the case tracking board. I would really suggest that people check out GHI, the command line client. GHI is GitHub Issues, and some people already use Hub, which is a kind of add-on to Git that adds a bunch of GitHub aware, super awesome commands to Git, so you can do like Git pull request and stuff like that. It's so cool. They were going to build in issues support as well, and I don't think they ever did, or I don't think it's shipped yet. But maybe they have. But GHI and maybe Hub Issues are already custom built clients for this, that we wouldn't have to write our own bots for, or our own little shell scripts or whatever. And I've done this before. Like I've had kind of issue creation automation use cases that I've used GHI for. So somebody can check that out and report back. Or whatever, right? Scripts too, or whatever, just whatever works. Okay, anything else? Board should be as minimal as possible so it doesn't leak anything identifiable. Exactly. Yeah, that's just the rule, right? Nothing identifiable, nothing sensitive. Just what was the nature of the issue? When did it happen? What was the nature of the issue? Links to existing known, critical bugs or whatever that caused the issue. Yeah, should not be linkable, right? Okay, cool. I think let's wrap it up. Feel free to jump in. Any last questions? Comments? Yeah, so let's just keep going in the sub team, right? And again, if anybody's on the call or listening after this that's interested in joining, right, go check out the intern instructions. If you can't find that link or whatever, just ping us, right? Just say, hey, I'm interested, and we'll give you the link and walk you through it. Thanks, everybody. I'm super excited about this, and I'm available, right? Like you're trying this out, you have a question, you have some improvement you want to make, really ping me, and me and Leo, right? We'll be on it. Okay, thanks so much. Talk to y'all soon.